Hey, Andy, you want to do us a favor and test your microphone?
Test, you guys hear me?
Yep, we sure can. Thanks.
Yep,
Andy, thanks for coming.
sure, that sounds like Joe, long time no see.
Yep. It's been a while since the reserve, I guess.
Yeah, yep,
So thanks again for your help in that.
yeah, not a problem.
Ms. Clark or Dr. Rambo, did Ms. Dodwell mention if to you?
I was gonna text her, but I didn't wanna, Teresa usually handles that task as well, so.
You should not.
The double text. We have some soda if you prefer that.
No, water is great, thank you.
Andy, we're waiting on one other. We'll get started as soon as we know one way or the other.
And the meeting question.
Is she under attendees maybe?
Yeah, there's one in there.
Okay.
I'm promoting her now.
She says she work her, I think she gets off at 3
Yeah.
from her job. I think she only works part-time, but I think it's 3 days, 3 p.m. several days a week.
Well, certainly that'll be one of the things we lead today with. What's a good time on what day? Kind of go from there. You as the council and our two consultants tell us what works best.
We're doing that now. I vote morning. Any morning is fine. I don't have to shake the sawdust out of my pants and put on a clean shirt.
That's the best part. See how you come rolling in.
I'm disappointed that Andy's not here in person because I wore my Smokey Bear t-shirt and
Oh, yeah.
Okay, great.
you're impressed, right?
I am, excellent.
We've spoken a bunch of times. I was looking forward to meeting you, but I guess we'll leave that till another time.
Yeah, maybe next time. I do recall having some lengthy phone calls with you regarding trees, so we never did get to meet in person. You still battling the ash trees on your property out there?
I got a couple hundred big ones that I'm just mostly leaving for snags because they'll kill you if you're not careful. So I just kind of give them a wide berth.
Right.
You know how they fail.
Yeah, they become quite brittle.
My apologies for my delay.
No problem. We were learning about snags.
Ash snags particularly.
Ash
They
snags.
kill a
are
lot of
pain.
lumbermen in the Ozarks because, they're all dying and they have this particular failure mode that it's not like a tree that splits or whatever. They will just suddenly fail, like you cut it with a chainsaw and then drop down beside the stump and they're really deadly.
Well, I think everyone is here that had acknowledged the meeting date and time, so thank you all very much. Item 1 on the agenda was more welcome and opening remarks by the subcommittee members. With your all's permission, it can be one of the council people that kind of lead the meeting. Not certainly us here on the other side of the table, be glad to do it. Somebody over there that'd like to do it?
Welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for being here this afternoon. This is an important thing for all of us to deal with, ensuring that we tell our residents and ourselves how we can best place new plantings, maintain existing plantings. So we want to update our guide so that it makes it a little bit easier for our residents to work with and understand.
Thank you, ma'am.
You're welcome.
Teresa? So I would like to say that I'm thrilled we're doing this. I am thrilled that we sort of led the charge back in the 90s. But this stuff is aged. Some parts have not aged well at all. And I hope to get us back in a leadership position instead of kind of behind the curve with, hey, we fully approve these particular invasives for ubiquitous planting throughout Wildwood, et cetera, et cetera. And we need to be more forward thinking with that. And I think we can condense it a lot. So I'm anxious to get started.
Sure.
Well, I don't have much to say except for the tree plantings themselves. We have people that are more expert on that than myself, but just looking at the manual and condensing it and making it more concise and making it something that's more at a glance that we can just thumb through and find the right page instead of have to read all of the verbiage because people aren't going to do that. So that's what I'd like to contribute.
Thank you all very much. Would one of you like to lead the meeting? Stop.
You can do it.
We'll go ahead and do roll call. We're all here, so that's done. And I'm doing this kind of out of order, so please bear with me. We'll do introductions here very shortly, but I went ahead and put the overview of the documents first, and it sounds very much like you've all reviewed them, so thank you very much. Just a little bit of background. Back in 1995, when we started developing the Tree Preservation and Restoration Code, we engaged a gentleman named Skip Kincaid, who has done a lot of different positions, and he works with Andy now at Hanson's Tree Service. But he, at that time, had his own company and was doing tree inventories, tree stand delineations, tree preservation plans. We believed, and we still believe, we had one of the best to help us. The landscape manual was completed as part of the Tree Preservation and Restoration Code in February of 1996. For all intents and purposes, we thought we hit a home run. And for the most part, we've used it like that for the past 28 years. What we've discovered as we went through some of the more difficult projects of late with Andy's help and others is that it really hasn't stood the test of time as well as we had hoped. And so that's the first component. The second is back around 2008, we did a sustainable plantings guide. And the rationale behind that was in 2007, we had a really bad drought. And what we were seeing out in the rural areas, particularly down by Six Flags and in the area of Milrose and 100, just a lot of the older wells going dry. And when we started to investigate the causes of that, it appeared that a lot of the new housing, which was much larger than what had been there, were not only filling their in-ground pools, but had installed irrigation. And so the shallower wells that had been there for years and years and years, unfortunately, weren't able to basically recharge and provide a quality source and a reliable source of potable water. So we came up with this idea of maybe if we help people understand what sustainable plantings would be that don't need a lot of watering from the valuable aquifer, maybe we could do that. As you know from the Sustainable Plantings Guide, it is thick, it is complex, and from my opinion. And so it's something that I think it's a good thing to have on the bookshelf, but I don't know if people use it as much as we had hoped. So those are the two documents. And I think what the subcommittee via the city council has said is we want a single document. We want something that's more favorable toward graphics, something people can look at and understand versus have to read paragraph upon paragraph. And then I think the key element, and we'll talk about this because I'm going to go around the room here shortly, is to get plantings on there that are truly native and plantings that will accommodate our type of soil and geology. For the most part, have an aesthetic appeal as well. So those are the two documents that we'll be working from and hopefully making into one and improving substantially. So any thoughts on the documents? I've given them to Christy, I've given them to Andy. I don't know if Maria has seen them.
She has.
I mean, you've all looked at them. I'd just like to get your impressions and I think it'll help our consultants understand what you're thinking about them and any just first thoughts, I guess, is what I'm asking for. Ms. Clark, I'll start with you since you're in my direct line of sight.
Okay. Well, you know, reading through it, it's, I think that when it was put together, it was probably one of the best put together, reports. There's quite a few things that, I think we could reduce the manual by, half of it if we increased the glossary. And if we just put everything in a glossary of, this is what all these terms mean, and then you don't have to describe it every time you go through another, you know, section. So that would be my first, just noticing it as I read through it quickly. And then going back in detail, there were a few things that I thought, you know, needs to be updated quite a bit, because for one thing, like the tree canopy, the tree delineation, the tree stand delineation. I could get that out, but that just the measurement on the paperwork and how it's described to, you know, you make your grid and count the squares and add up all of the areas of the squares and the rectangles. I mean, it was quite a simplified way of I mean, it was an estimate of the area, but I think we could be a lot more precise, maybe not precise, but accurate with it, because we've got tools that are so cheap that we could buy some. And forgive me, I'm old, so the mechanical ones is what I used to use, was the planimeter, where you put it, and it rolls and you draw around an object and then you look at it and it tells you the area. So I'm sure there's digital ones now or something a lot more that saves us time. Not that that's something we couldn't do. I mean, it's easy to do to estimate that area, but time saving things, like buy a device that costs $100 that will save lots of time.
Well, can I interrupt? The onus is on the people for the most part submitting, you know, plans and so on and so forth. But the term of art for that is you're gonna polygon it out, right? Like you got this weird shaped field and you polygon it out to this many acres. Every forester and habitat restoration person out there knows how to do that. It's really, as you suggest, there's tools available that are really cheap and you can just do boom like that. So you're exactly right.
And
on that.
what I'm saying is for the cities,
So I'm saying it's really cheap.
yeah, it's
So-
really cheap. I'm sure we could get one for really cheap. Go to Granger or someplace, I don't know where, but and that was one of the things that stood out to me. And another thing that stood out to me is if we are going to say that residents need to do these things, we need to do these things. So some of the things like tree trimming, some of our practices for trimming trees along like Wild Horse Creek Road, we rip them apart. We don't follow our own rules, so we need to be more closer to what we ask.
I don't know if it's we rip them apart or Ameren rips them apart or whoever is doing the tree trimming in some of these locations. They are
Ameren's,
destroying trees.
Ameren's contractors generally do a good job. Ameren linemen do a terrible job. And homeowners do an even worse job sometimes. But I would take a step back from what you're saying, Teresa. Those are important details, but this meeting, my impression of this meeting is we're gonna kind of decide on the philosophy, the overarching philosophy, because I got a lot of little details on defining caliper and defining critical root zone and so on and so forth. But what I would suggest is we talk about Can it be combined, can 3 of these documents be combined or 2 of these documents be combined into one document? And if so, what do we leave out? And those kinds of things. Because otherwise I think we're gonna get down in the weeds without having a clear idea of where we want to go first.
I understand that, but I'm using a few of the details just to make my point about that.
Okay, yeah.
So I have lists of details.
No, of course you do.
But I'm just picking out a few that's just making my point that that it is possible to take these 2 documents and make a much more concise and readable one. Because there's so many of those things in there that we really, are need to be looked at. But I think maybe we could have even one that we keep that has everything in it for the city. And then the other one that we put on the website or something for the residents so that it's easier. They don't want to go through all of this stuff, the details of what we are going to do.
Well, don't our developers need the details?
They need the details, but not in all of this verbiage.
Mhm.
You can reduce it.
Yeah,
The verbiage is redundant.
the plans that we show, leaving aside the fact that some of them are horrendous. The plans that we show, this is a great, sort of a field guide or a usage guide or a consumer guide or something like that with the pictures and how much water they need and so on and so forth. The developers don't need any of that. They just need, these are the genre of approved plantings.
Mhm.
And if you're putting in this subset, they should be sterile. Recognizing that there are errors galore at even the best of nurseries and so forth, and some of them aren't really going to be what we are expect, and they're not going to be sterile necessarily. But I think a list of plantings can replace 3/4 of this document.
I agree. And I was thinking, looking through this, working with and manufacturing, automotive manufacturing for so long. When we would launch a new vehicle, I mean, there's thousands and thousands of parts in a vehicle, right? But we reduced it down to just basic things that we needed to know in a little book, pocket book that you could have with you and you could just look it up whenever you needed it. So that reducing everything down into, here's the important things. If I need to know more about it, I can go look it up on the website, more detail, or ask somebody.
Well, I was gonna ask if there's an industry standard website that has all the information on each of the plant species that anybody would recommend.
Yes, Missouri Department of Conservation does a fine job with that. The
Do
Missouri
they have
Botanical
all
Garden.
of them?
Well, they have what we need. In my, this is just my personal opinion, but Mobot, they are glowing with their praise of even horribly invasive species, because their role is not to keep people from planting invasives. Their role is to educate the public about what they already have and so on and so forth. But Mobot does a much better job. I mean, MDC, Missouri
MDC.
Conservation Department, does a much better job at, these are somewhat invasive or really invasive or whatever. And I think we need to, if I had to state a philosophy right now, I would say we need to get away from thinking truly natives, because that depends on how far back you go. Do you go back to pre-Columbian? Do you, and so on and so forth. So it should be non-invasive. That should be our focus. And we should, had we done a better job thinking about that 30 years ago when nobody was thinking about it, we'd be in a better shape today instead of fighting invasives in all our woodlands. So I would say that we should take a sustainability, but also a non-invasive, a cohabitability approach to the recommendations.
I think, and this is why I think Christie's input as well as Andy's will be critical, is we can put down non-invasives, we can put down natives, And oftentimes it's what's available at local nurseries,
Mhm.
or wherever the development community or the resident goes.
You can still buy honeysuckle at some nurseries, right?
Oh,
You can
yeah.
buy Russian olive. Oh, cardinal
Well-
autumn olive. Oh, it's beautiful red berries. And so it's just ridiculous. And
But
so,
like in Christie's case, and I shouldn't speak for her, but when she does a landscape plan, she has to know what's available. She can't develop a plan, put something on it, and then they can't find it.
Mhm.
That's a missed opportunity, right?
sure, and that's why I was suggested genre instead of being specific with a species, you know, or a cultivar or whatever, because they can, you know, if we specify, you know, these parameters for a particular plant, then they can use their creativity to find one that's about this big, that grows this fast, et cetera, without being locked into a particular cultivar, because that's what we tried to do and failed in some instances. Do you agree with that or not?
When you say they,
Uh-huh.
you mean us? Like, we're gonna make some recommendations on the types of plants? Or are you meaning they as in the residents? So
No,
we
I'm
should-
suggesting that we give the professionals guidelines, appropriate guardrails, and then you can do your magic and everybody wins, because you have to do the work of figuring out, hey, this is available and it fits these criteria and it's non-invasive and it's drought tolerant, it's blah, 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 and it gets 6 feet tall.
Right, which we do that on almost every single project. We talk with the client and understand what the parameters are, just like we're doing now. And then we go back to work and we start doing our research and seeing what's available, what's gonna work. Which you guys are very familiar with, your soils and all of your typologies and everything, but we'll double check that and then in turn, make it user friendly so that it's graphically pleasing, it's pared down. You could have an appendix, you know, you talked about, I wrote, what's the deliverable? Is it a deliverable for developers? Is it deliverable for residents? Is it for the city? Is there one that's 3 different handouts for 3 different, and then there's the appendix that has all of our kind of information on how we got there and how we pared it down to your reference to the car manual, you know, like, here's a manual, but
I would prefer that we make it meaningful to all parties. And then if more detail is needed, we refer them to the appendix so that a developer can get more details if they want to, or our planning and zoning teams can look at the details if they want to, but our general population or a company that wants to build houses out here wants to get a quick scan of, okay, what can we plant out here? If I gotta build my planting guide with my development components, what can I use, kind of thing. But then there's more detail for the professionals on the back of it. I think that would be helpful. I also think it's helpful that we do have some kind of reference for pictures for the residents, because pictures are worth 1,000 words. If you tell somebody it's a 6-foot bush, you really don't know beyond, okay, bush, what color is the bush? What kind of leaves does it have on it? And you want some kind of visual reference on it as well, so.
Well, wouldn't you look if there was a specification for, I just looked at yarrow. Wouldn't you, if you're interested in doing some planting in your yard, wouldn't you go beyond that you know, just the name and say, and look at the conservation department site or something like that, and that's where the pictures are? I mean, it seems like reasonable to
Yeah,
expect people do that.
I'm saying we just have to, whatever we develop, we have to have a place for a resident or a developer to go to. We don't have to design it
Yeah,
ourselves, I don't think.
Yeah,
but I think the pictures pique their interest. So if we were to include some visual, then they would kind of look, for the most part, I would say, they're gonna look through and, ooh, I wanna know more information about that one. And so I think the pictures are important.
I was trying to cut the size down because it feels almost like you can select from this menu of items, and it's not the case at all. There are a lot more available plantings than we have in this guide.
And maybe we don't have to do a picture for every single one, but having visuals, I think is
I
very
agree with you.
appealing.
What about this? A few pages of a full-blown landscape design that has a key and identifies, this is a mature, one of our mature landscapes, and it's got these in the front, these in the middle, these in behind. It's this color, it's that color, and maybe show it, in various seasons of the year so people can get so it condenses the information and they can kind of work off of that rather than having, I just think this is overload, and it's not useful overload because it like this here,
Mhm.
some things like that show here's how you can make your land. That's inspiring to me, not just a single plan.
Okay,
But I think we're getting
I think,
back
yeah,
into
I
details
think
again
that's-
now, so,
I think we have some visuals that we can share after this meeting or at the next meeting or something that I think you would enjoy. It's like that, but it's almost like a picture and then a diagram over the top. And we even have some bullet points off that just kind of keys into if you're wanting to reduce the amount of well water that you're, then this is a suggestion, or this is a sample project that does that. So instead of saying X, Y, and Z, they can flip through and start to see some of the characteristics that they might want to improve the site on. If it's a existing residence that wants to just be more sustainable, how do you convert that? We get those questions a lot.
Mhm.
Versus then a new developer coming in and wanting to develop a whole field that, needs to kind of be from a fresh start.
there's a lot of nature beaten into submission. And I would like to change the orientation to working with nature and making it beautiful, but a bit more natural, because it's easier to do sustainable plantings when you do that. And if you get people out of the mode of this needs to look like a topiary garden or, something at Mobot or something like that, and get them into this riot of flowers that's blooming all the time and it's got pollinators and this and that kind of thing. I mean, that's the way to do it.
Bria, we should hire him.
But if I have a mission statement, it is to reduce the quantity and the quantity of invasives that we allow and in some cases encourage, like, there's, feather grass. Oh my God, am I fighting that? And, Sericia Lespedeza, that was from the Conservation Department. And I have a book that my grandmother got in the 50s from the USDA that says kudzu for erosion control. And that's what you get if you're not careful. And so, and it breaks my heart to see some of the plantings that we have. I've complained to Joe enough that I won't complain again about certain places that we have planted several hundred, invasive bushes or whatever, but we can do lots better.
Are these photos from around the city or?
Not necessarily.
Okay,
It's just a sampling that was available off
Okay.
the internet and other
Okay.
sources.
okay.
And I think that the pictures are useful to the residents who have plantings already,
Mhm.
and they're trying to figure out what it is, because they don't know the name to go look it up on any website, so they can see something and go, oh, that looks like what I've got out here, and I want another one of those. or-
That's a
Maybe,
different
or-
thing.
or-
That's a guidebook.
Maybe there's might be a tools page.
Tools.
And
out there
so
that
we
can
could,
get.
I don't know how you all feel about like recommending some certain apps, but there are some really good apps to help with identification. And so instead of us trying to cover every single plant that they might have in there, we would almost just create this toolkit to, because somebody might need to do soil samples to understand what the soil is. I have not read this through and through, and I will, but telling them these are the steps to understanding your site and how we can then best approach it.
Yeah, that's if you give them the tool, then you can get, like, I just got a 7-year-old excited about iNaturalist, which is an app. And that kid's looking at bugs and he's looking at leaves. He's 7.
Mhm.
And it's a great way to get people hooked on, oh yeah, maybe it's best if I don't kill all the damn bees in my yard, right? And so like, like we're doing with ash trees, which is another one of my pet peeves.
Well, we'll have to whatever tools we come up with, we'll have to put a little asterisk next to it and say, these may be updated on a 5-year basis or something like that, because they will come and go. So that's just one of the things we'll just have to put a little caveat in the document.
I don't want to curtail discussion, but is there any other major points you as the subcommittee would like to identify? Because I'd like to give Andy.
I was going to suggest that trees are separate from the grasses and forbs that we've been discussing for the most part. The street trees and so forth, that's a subset of this, but it's an important one, and it takes a different skill set, I think, than landscape design. In my opinion, you may disagree a bit, but trees are special to us. And we have lots of them that are dying because we didn't do the right job in the first place. And had we done the right preparation work and the right selection work, we'd have a beautiful streetscape on Manchester instead of a bunch of dead trees. So
Yeah, and we would happily work with Andy, but we deal with trees and tree selection a lot as well. So that would be a great team.
I think Andy's strength is helping us with the tree stand delineation, tree preservation plan, those components to kind of cover that field investigation that we require most everyone now relative to any development proposal. And from that perspective, Andy's done a great job for us in the past. That's why team highly recommended.
well, site preparation too. I mean, the tree wells that we have all over, that's a classic use for a qualified arborist. As opposed to a landscape designer, in my opinion.
Just from the perspective of the department, if we spend any extraordinary amount of time on any subject, I think it should be street trees. Because as you council people know, when you have to review the budget, every year we seem to be replacing street trees we did a year or two before, and it's a puzzle we haven't figured out quite yet.
Yeah, Manchester streetscape, it's heartbreaking when you drive down there. Half the trees are dead and the other half are dying. Oh,
Any other things you'd like to add? I'd like to get just Andy, Maria, and Christie's first impressions of what they've looked at, and then we'll jump on to the other items in the agenda. Andy, what are you thinking?
I was hoping I can get my hands on my notes that I provided you 2 years ago whenever I dissected that 96 tree manual. Because that I dissected and provided a lot of my own feedback to that, which I could do again.
I still have,
I'm sorry.
I still have those notes.
Yeah, I'd imagine you do. If someone can share those with me at some point, I'd love to see that. I did look over last night your amendment to the ordinance, and I see some updated definitions and some other things like that, which is all great because a lot of the definitions and verbiage is outdated. Because as a lot of you are aware, when it comes to arboriculture or urban forestry, it's very dynamic. So the technical terminology and all that is ever so changing as scientific advancements occur. So just making sure definitions are up to date. I had made a lot of notes 2 years ago on the tree stand delineation process specific to Wildwood. I think that reserve project is what opened up this can of worms. There's a lot of ambiguity, specifically in the grand tree definition, which I see has been revised. But then just that process alone, the difference between like a 5 acre and smaller parcel than a 5 acre and greater parcel, what that process looks like, the tree preservation planning process. And I can help, I do as a consultant, I do this with other cities in the St. Louis region. They're all a little bit different. So I can, explain what works, what doesn't work. I don't have that stuff in front of me today, but for future meetings. And then back to, going back to the tree lists, we could sit there and make a gigantic approved tree list for certain characteristics. But what a lot of municipalities are going to now is do not plant lists. They're a lot smaller and they help you out with especially with the invasive conversation. I've never done any of the landscape plans. Usually when I'm hired by a developer or someone in that regard to do the tree stand delineations, tree preservation plans, that's where usually I have stopped. Then the landscape architects take over with the landscape plans, but I can certainly help with some of the technical aspects of that. So I'm here to help with some of the technical side of stuff. I have not looked at that sustainable planting guide. I've kind of thumbed through it in the last few days, which looks like a great document, but I know the goal here is to combine the two. And as someone's mentioned before, I think a robust appendix is going to be needed because all of this stuff is very lengthy and technical. So, and just full transparency, Joe called me a week ago to bring me onto this team, so I didn't have a whole lot of heads up. I didn't have any specifics to bring to the table today, but I've done work for the city of Wildwood in the past as their consultant for 2 years, or consulting arborist, and have done a lot of tree stand delineations, tree preservation plans for Wildwood and other communities. So that is where I currently stand.
Any thoughts?
I kind of second what Andy said is we're just kind of getting started on this. So I kind of treat this as the kickoff meeting, and we'll just really listening to understanding what your goals are, what your the overall deliverable might start to look like. And then we'll dive in with both feet and try to kind of synthesize everything and update it and bring our recommendations. I think just having a fluid document that we all can mark our notes on, because I know you guys have a whole bunch of notes, but we have tools that we use, digital tools, which we could put the documents on there and then let you all comment and see each other's comments. I think that might be really valuable, so that you two may have the exact same comment, or you might have the opposing comment, and then we know that we need to have a discussion about that at the next meeting. What
tools do you use?
We use just like the Google Suite, the online version, so you can see who's in there and whose comments are in there. So very, very readily available to everybody. But so yeah, I'm excited to get going on this. I appreciate the opportunity.
I'll ask if Maria has anything, or if your comments will stand for her.
Hi, everybody. I'm also thrilled to be in this conversation. I'm passionate about plants and trees and, generally landscape architecture and what it can do to really bring a lot of health and, benefits to our community. So I think this is a wonderful conversation to have. I think that in terms of, combining these two topics into a single document, there is the tree preservation. I think that there are some technical aspects to that might be slightly different than, the sustainability. So I fully agree that we need to understand your goals for sustainability. In the current sort of like arena of landscape architecture and other professions, what landscape can do for sustainability is much broader than just water conservation. Water conservation is a huge aspect, but we're also talking about heat island mitigation. We're talking about carbon sequestration. We're talking about, health in the soils. There's a habitat creation. There is a whole suite of other things that could fall into a sustainability category. So it becomes really quite layered. And I fully agree that it's almost like we also really need to understand and be very clear about the audience. If it totally makes sense that we would create something for homeowners that is very accessible, and we need to decide what that looks like. What is the tool that we create that will communicate the best to a homeowner? But there is for a developer, I do think that there is another level of requirements that cities might wanna start asking for, because there is, for a homeowner is their home, and there is a love of the garden and all of that, and they're trying to do the best they can. For a developer, we should be looking at really like how are they working with stormwater on site and so forth. So I do think that maybe it's a question for you all, is like, what is the correct sort of like level? Maybe an entry for homeowners, and then how that gets ramped up for the developers. So, and in terms of the tree preservation, I also scanning quickly through these documents, and I'm really looking forward to really digging in and seeing what information is out there. I do think that we could simplify a lot, and then Missouri has really good information. The Missouri Botanical Garden has excellent information on native plants. All the water. So I would almost like suggest like we start thinking of like how can we use existing resources to link into anything we produce. Well, there was a lot said, and my thoughts are also like I have a lot of ideas, but I think that yeah, like really getting clear on the goals, and then with DG2 can sort of like complement these desires in the best way to move it forward. And the last thing that I would say is that maybe we don't, as it was also second other people thoughts, that we don't have to list every plant, we don't have to list everything. Many states are going to like maybe highlighting, what are the qualities that you want in a garden, what are the top 10 plants, and then give them a resource where they can expand on that. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Yeah, Joe.
Yes, sir.
Maria said a lot of the things that I was trying to say in a different, probably a better way, but this meeting I was hoping would be mostly concerned with the philosophy. What's the goal that we're trying to achieve? And it's absolutely correct that we need something that's accessible to homeowners, but homeowners also need to understand that just because a plant's a pretty plant doesn't mean it belongs in their landscape. These are the advantages of going with the types of plants that we're suggesting. Maria went through a whole list of them. The water quality, the carbon sequestration, the improvements to soil, the pollinators, which is a big deal. Resistance to pests without a lot of pesticides. Those kinds of things we can steer people in the right direction, and a lot of people are off just, I don't care, it's honeysuckle's green and it screens me from my neighbor. And if we could get people on board with, okay, well, I might have to clear this out because it's horribly invasive and it's not nutritious to the birds and so on and so forth. Replant something that 3 years later is going to be a visual screen, but it has all these other advantages as well. That's what I would like to achieve with the next generation of our plantings guide, because this is 30 years old. People are catching on, but not as fast as I would have hoped. I've been crusading for 50 years and I haven't gotten anywhere, and I'm going to die soon. And I would like to know that we're on a better path. And so, deciding what we want to do with this document. I think the toolkit at the back or the front or whatever that refers people to, I'm cautious about MOBOT because they're agnostic on invasives. more than I would like us to be, and the Missouri Department of Conservation is less so. They say these are bad plants and you don't plant them. And so to Andy's point, maybe we just have something like don't plant this stuff. And you know, these are the advantages of planting some of the things that we might suggest. And that's a philosophical, you know, stake in the ground that I think we can work around and come up with an approach that these folks can then work with. I'm sorry.
Already stuck, don't plant this list
Yeah.
right on the top of this
A
one.
big old.
Right, I like that, I liked her ideas about that, you know, don't plant this list, but then to have these other categories sort of, here's what I want for my garden. And then you can go to, from this is what I want, some flowering, you know, multicolors. And so you can go to this category, it wouldn't be called that, but a category of, this is the list of things that
These
I
are
can pick
perennials
from. Yeah,
that I
this
can
is what
pick
I
from.
really want to put in my garden.
These are grasses that I can pick from.
Yeah.
Yes,
These are bushes that I can pick
Yeah.
from. These
Exactly
are
right.
trees that I can pick from.
Yep.
And here's the pluses and minuses of each variety of them. And then, I mean, even if we took this kind of document and added more detail in there of these don't take a lot of water, or these, I don't know, some of the other categories that you were talking about.
Yeah,
Non-invasive.
it's part of this is as simple as saying, oh, you know, that silvergrass that you love, it's invading our park. But you can do, you know, in some combination of Indian grass and big blue and other things that may not be quite as dramatic, but overall in the area, it's going to be spectacular. And guess what? The wildlife's happy too.
So I
And
think it's a big part of this, we deal with this all the time and I'm preaching to the choir, but is education. Because people are stubborn and they want those topiaries and they want, you know, so having that exact thing that you said, where you have this silver grass or whatever, and the big X, don't plant this. These are the reasons why.
yes,
You know,
yes.
it starts to really paint the picture, because it's really difficult. When we have a client come to us, they're like, okay, we want a beautiful landscape with zero maintenance. And I'm like, that doesn't exist, you know, like it's not. So it's hard to educate, and we can try our absolute best, but, you know, they need to understand why are they turning to this document? What are they trying to achieve versus just, I want a flower to fill this void. It's almost like we're taking a step back and saying, this is what the city is encouraging.
Here's how you
This
fit
is a
into the environment.
philosophy here. And I personally don't think it ends with residents, or I should say humans. Like, there should be a category for animals out there, you know, so pollinators, but expand on that a little bit, because as we continue to develop this world, we just have to think about it. And maybe it may not be just tied to the landscape, but just as we're continuing to think about development in the city, you know, safe crossings and different stuff like that, that we, as landscape architects, are starting to really keep in mind, is that we're developing for the human world, but we need to hand in hand be developing for the animals that we are living with.
Don't plant,
We should have made an extra row on those overpasses, those walking overpasses for the deer and the antelope and the,
well, the deer can find their own way as far as I'm concerned, but.
We've
But
got so
I-
many that need to
even
be
like,
killed.
yeah, just different things that we do, pesticides that we spray, you know, that people don't think twice of. They're just out there, and it's our job to try to make them think twice.
If you like the look of burning bush, plant wahoo, it's better for the you know, those kinds of, real simple. And people think, oh, honeysuckle has these big red berries. I'll say olive, because I've been ranting on honeysuckle, but olive,
We've got plenty.
they eat it, but it's not nutritious, and then they crap it all over and it's growing in your woods, and you know, you can't get rid of that stuff. It doesn't even respond to Roundup, and I don't like Roundup, so I'm digging and so forth, and most folks aren't gonna do that, but there's a way to, I think the key is education. It's kind of like pollution control. The best thing is source reduction. Get rid of it before it starts. And your education idea is that's the philosophy that we should, coalesce around, in my opinion. I know I'm talking a lot, guys, but as you can tell, I'm excited about this topic, so.
I actually will explain hopefully the method to my madness, but before I do that, Maria, you have your hand up.
Thank you. Yes, I think that this provides a lot of clarity in terms of the direction for the sustainability sort of like guidelines, if we might call it. And I am curious also if folks want to sort of like give a little more clarity in terms of the tree preservation manual. From what I saw in the manual, there is a little bit of species selection, but also as maybe homeowners or developers go into making improvements, what are the methods to protecting existing trees? So I am curious, what do we want this tree preservation to be, and a little bit more the goals on that regard. And one thing that I think that is not enough discussed regarding trees, and Andy, I'm curious your opinion on this, but it's like, I think that often the reason why trees die, well, there is a combination of things, but we don't talk enough about the soil volume that tree needs, especially when we want to have really large canopy trees that are going to be doing a lot of the work that we want for our streets and our cities. We really need to give the space. So I think that almost like really providing some direction in terms of like species and space available can go a long way to having trees that are gonna last as long as they should.
Thank you, ma'am. So just to kind of respond back to you, Dr. Rambo, there is a bit of method to my madness. I know you said that you hope out of this meeting would come some goals or some clear goals relative to what we wanted to achieve. And I think we started to touch upon them. Just from the conversation from you three as the subcommittee, you want it to be meaningful to all parties. You want to create a toolkit. You want, in many regards, to do a no plant list. So we haven't done these overarching universal goals, but you're slowly but surely telling, at least me, and I think our consultant team and Travis and Melanie, these are the things that would be key elements to the document. So I think having just maybe a free form discussion in your first thoughts is really beneficial.
Oh, no, I wasn't suggesting otherwise. I'm just saying, we got to pick a horse before we ride it, right? And so the Swiss Army knife approach, I'm going to continue to lobby against that for the time being, because I don't think my little scissors on my Swiss Army knife don't cut as well as a regular pair of scissors. And so maybe we have a document for the developers that's different and distinct and maybe cross-referencing and so forth. And it's not, I'm not suggesting 20 documents, but I'm suggesting maybe we have more narrowly focused documents for the homeowners and so on. So
that's another thing that's just come out of your three's discussion with us is it probably is going, although we may want to combine it into a single document, it's going to have multiple sections and targeted toward different audiences. And that's what we're hearing. And so the second component of the method to the madness is I have at least 3 items now for our next agenda that you've all identified. Setting the goals, the audience that we want to reach, and then in a general term, the format. So your input's important because, at least from my perspective, I think we as, let's say, the professionals could start and move in a direction we think is appropriate. But at the end of the day, it's more important that you tell us what direction you think is best. And then we can work from that and tell you if it's a workable end what might not be workable and obviously what we don't want to do.
Restrain the developers and educate the public. That's it,
That's it.
right?
That's it.
Don't cheap out Mr. Developer or Ms. Developer.
Mhm.
Do the right thing based on, based on the guardrails that we put in. And here, Mr. and Mrs. John Q. Public, here's the way you ought to be thinking about plantings that are gonna outlast you.
Mhm.
So what I'd like to do, and I'm heading toward number 5 on our agenda, is from the perspective of the department, what I would like us to do for all of you, including the consultant team, is basically put down some notes from today's meeting so you can see what you all said in context of the different components of the agenda. And then from there, that will be what we ask you to provide any additional feedback before we meet again. There's a little bit of homework, unfortunately. But if you thought of something outside as you walked out and driving home, and you think, oh, that was a good idea, I'd like us to explore that more, that kind of thing. From that perspective, I think when we get back together as a group, I want us to basically talk about the goals, the audience, and the format, the more universal things if we can. Unless the consultant team has a different approach, and certainly I think we're all open to that. So from that perspective, the next meeting would be more of let's get down into some of the more specifics. We certainly have heard a lot of good things. The only other thing I would add to that whole over list is whatever we do, it has to be deer resistant. Despite white buffalo, I don't think our problem is going to go away anytime soon.
Has to be deer resistant. It has to be, like, for example, something came for our ash trees. When the gypsy moths make it across the Mississippi, it's game over for the white oaks, quite likely. Next thing that's gonna go is shagbark hickory because they don't tolerate the heat like the other trees do. And so it has to be climate tolerant. And that's a third rail in Wildwood as much as anybody, any place. You can't really talk about climate change. It's a myth, but we need to be strong about making that position, even if we don't talk about it in terms of climate change, heat tolerance or something like that.
There's a goal statement or mission statement in this document. I think Marie had up on the highlights. Water conservation, heat island, soil health, the carbon reduction, the pollinators, those things. So, those are the things we're going to send back to you and say, maybe prioritize them for them. Let us know what you think are the priorities.
And habitat. I mean, habitat wasn't specifically
Yeah,
mentioned,
habitat.
but that covers the birds and the bees and the, flowers and the rest of the trees, right? Everything but the moon.
So
Excuse me, would it be helpful if we put together like a quick digital survey that kind of covered some of these and would help you guys to prioritize it, and we could email it to you so that we could at least then at the next meeting see how everybody prioritized some of that versus at a meeting just saying, I think such and such should be first.
That'd be helpful, I think.
Okay.
please do.
Do that.
Excellent
Definitely.
suggestion.
And then if the three of you individuals have some example plans that perhaps other cities have put together, or you have worked with specific clients for their particular business campus or educational campus around what we're trying to accomplish. If we could get that before our next meeting as kind of a guidepost for these are ways that we can communicate that information back to our residents and our developers. So we're not starting with, well, on page 1, I think we need to have an introduction, and on page 2, maybe we have, a little bit more solid understanding of what you guys in your industry have been developing for your client base, that we could maybe get a better direction on.
Yeah, I'm hoping we wind up leading the charge again for the next 30 years. But what I will say is, or what I would request is your survey, if you leave us a little space to drive a stake in the ground concerning our answer because it depends on perspective, and I'd like to be able to document that perspective. On, you know, I'd like to have the opportunity to do that, and, you know, instead of just saying, this is number one, this is number six, without, without saying why.
So one of the last items just on the next steps. As part of the overall memorandums that were provided to the Planning and Parks Committee, we talked about a need to have this done sooner than later. Because the development community isn't static in Wildwood, nor our residents in terms of what they're doing. So I'd like to maybe meet a little more regularly than maybe we typically do to the benefit of the consultant team so that we can maybe have something done by spring, at least in a draft. The goal was to have it in early 2024. That's what was described in the memorandums. So in terms of a meeting schedule, I'm not going to assume the consultants are readily available every hour of every day, but it's more important that you three be available. So what are you all thinking in terms of, I know Dr. Rambo mentioned mornings is preferred day of the week.
I'll come anytime because this has been a personal priority throughout my life, and I'm excited to get it done. And I think the sooner we get it done, maybe we can sort of lead the charge on some of the work, the subdivisions that are in the planning stages. You know, we can get ahead of that curve and force them into this new, philosophy. The education component, I think, is going to be helpful separate. So I would say I'll make time. Personally, I'll make time.
Stop.
Could we do it? I'm available pretty much Monday through Wednesday after 3 o'clock, and on Fridays, pretty much anytime. So you pick what works for you guys.
Ms. Clark, any?
Well, I can be there most any time too, but if Fridays work for everybody else, it's a day we don't have other meetings going on, so. we won't
Yeah, but I don't know
have
if
to
these guys are
prepare on-
finishing up their stuff
Yeah,
for the
well,
week.
that's what
and
I'm just
need
saying.
their
If
packets.
Actually, Friday might be our busiest day with packets and such.
Yeah.
Meetings.
Well, then, that was just a thought. So,
Okay. Andy, what are you all thinking in terms of a day?
I am pretty free most days, especially now with my current position. Things are slowing down as we approach fall and winter. So as we get to the meat and potatoes this winter, I'll have a lot of availability. So I'll leave that to you all and can make most things work.
As long as we set a time that works, we can make our schedule work around it. That's fine.
I mean, morning is preferred for me, but I will make morning or afternoon work.
What if we did it 3 o'clock, Tuesday, the 24th?
Okay. Tuesday, October 24th. 2, did you say 2 or 3 o'clock? I'm sorry.
3 o'clock.
3 o'clock.
So
Thank you.
are you guys doing packets like every Friday typically, or?
Yeah, unfortunately, pretty much it's commission and council. Then like this week, we've been doing development and zoning review, watershed erosion task force. And there was one other too as well. So
Next week.
3
in parks.
afternoons, I have to stay clean all morning to come to an afternoon meeting or else take a shower, and it wastes a lot of time for me, but
Well, maybe
I'll
the
make it happen.
situation is like it is now. Everybody's kind of sitting far away from it.
I think that might have been on purpose, but or I'll just zoom in or something.
I'm kidding.
If you guys
but
don't mind sawdust,
Not at all.
I kind of thought the collector class Rolex would kind of spiff up my outfit a little bit, but maybe not. Best thing to do is shower, I guess. Yeah, so 3 p.m. What'd you say? What, Tuesday?
Tuesday, the 20th.
3 p.m., October 24th. Thank you all for accommodating my schedule. I'm sorry, I'm a little strapped there. I know.
And we would continue to do hybrid so that if you do get caught short, you can zoom in, but
Okay.
otherwise we'll be in the community room.
Okay.
Unless there's an objection to that.
Okay.
Maria's telling me, Maria, you can speak up. That time does
Yeah.
not work. Is there
Sorry, I have only like a couple ongoing, ongoing calls, and Tuesdays at 3 p.m. is one of those times. So unfortunately for me, 3 p.m. does not work. Earlier would work or later would work, but 3 p.m. is conflict.
What about Wednesday, Katie? We have meetings on Tuesdays a lot, but we don't on Wednesdays, so.
I could do. Normally I could do Wednesdays. I'll just call my doctor and reschedule an appointment.
I don't know. Well,
I can do that.
What about Thursday?
on Tuesday, the
Thursday.
24th, Maria would, I mean, we could start later. That's the other thing. Could we, if
It's fine, yeah, because it'll be getting dark pretty soon.
Would
Aren't we,
4 o'clock
aren't we
work
going
better?
back to standard time for one final go round?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, so it'll be dark anyway.
Maria, would 4 o'clock work?
Or would be perfect. Thank you.
Ms. Dodwell?
Yeah, that's fine.
gives you more time to shower.
Yeah,
Yeah.
You can take a really long.
I hate doing it on Tuesday, but you know, it's
What, showering? You don't
Yeah.
shower on Tuesday?
usually Saturday, that's it.
I usually just like to go around the room before we conclude and just ask if there's anything else that you'd like to add or something we missed, or is there better drinks to have at your table besides cocktails? Clark,
I think we covered it and are set for looking at the next meeting, set goals, the stakeholders and the format of it. We will have the survey put out that we can prioritize and looking at maybe adding a toolkit and no plant list and glossary to pull things out. I think organizing, that's what I got out of it.
Ms. Dodwell.
Yeah, I think it makes sense to maybe come up with the table of contents for our effort. And then we can start grouping it. This is the section or sections that go to the developers, and these are the sections that, you know, preach the philosophy and so on and so forth. And this is the toolkit section, and this is the glossary section or something like that. That makes a lot of sense to me, but I would say that maybe we should pretty quickly build 2805, their modifications done, because I only had a couple of suggestions and I think it's pretty much ready to go. Is this a separate piece? The legislation, is that separate from these, or does it have, so we can do this? This is probably the good first step.
Yep.
Okay, so I have a few tweaks. Andy probably has some of the same tweaks, and some of these other folks may as well. So how should we best do that? Just send it to
Yeah,
you.
it'd be nice to get this approved at the next council meeting and be done with it for this year.
Yeah, check it off the list.
Just let me know. Christie.
Will you share everyone's contact information so that we can then communicate? Otherwise, I don't have anything else.
All of the council members have city emails as well, and then the general number of extensions if you wanted to do that. I won't share private cells, we just don't do that, but certainly if there's a need, we can pass it on. Travis.
I don't have anything to add to the discussion. I do have a lot of ideas and thoughts that'll come out later about format and how we can do this with a printed document and digital document and some maybe social media resources, but that'll come up later.
Social media.
Ditto. And I honestly think that a lot of it is just having a good electronic resource is super helpful. And so, yes, we will need the documents in order to get there. But I think that it's generally the easiest way for people to get around anymore. And so, yeah, I think that these
I've
are
got
all
4 meg
excellent
down,
suggestions.
so until January, I don't get around on the internet. Despite having spent a career building big old honking fiber optic networks. 4 megabits. Oh, I'm so ready for a charter. Joe, I have a question. Do we have a sort of an in-house expert? I know these guys have expertise in document creation of all kinds. Do we have somebody that we kind of go to help with creating something as a useful document? Or do we just kind of is each one a custom effort?
That's the missing consultant, and that's Stacy Minkoff. And I didn't invite her to this meeting because she's the one that formatted the history book. And I think did a wonderful job.
Okay.
So that somebody will be at the next meeting as we start talking format stuff and things.
Awesome. Good deal.
Andy, any last thoughts?
No, just as long as we get the meeting minutes, just to help me stay organized, and I look forward to working on this with you all.
Thank you. Maria?
I think this was a great introduction. There is a lot, really great dialogue. So looking forward to the process.
Thank you, ma'am. Any final thoughts? Otherwise, we'll get something from EG2, Christie, as a survey. And from the Department of Planning and Parks, you'll get a summary of the meeting in terms of a set of probably very, hopefully not overcomplicated minutes. And then we'll send out the agenda and the information as soon as we can, hopefully a week prior to the meeting, which is now scheduled for Tuesday, October 24th at 4 p.m.
Do you have electronic copy of Andy's prior notes? Because I may only have a printout.
Yes,
And if
I
you could
do.
shoot those to him instead of me, that'd probably be.
Yep. And I'll send that to everybody so they can see what Andy had done for us. With that, I think we've concluded. I'd like to make a motion to adjourn.
I make that
Mark?
motion.
Ms. Dodwell, and all in favor.
Aye.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you, guys. Great meeting.
Nice
Appreciate it.
meeting you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Christie, did you say a second? I need to talk about.
Oh,
Well,
well,
wait a
that's,
minute, wait a minute.
I know, I'm
Sure.
waiting.
How do you spell your last name?